Hey folks, this is Eston again, and we are back with another audiobook review. I'm very excited to give you guys the second book in the series. It's He Who Fights with Monsters, Book 2, by Shirtaloon, narrated by Heath Miller. Okay, so, once again, another great book in the series. It's really nice to see whenever you have a second book that is not significantly worse than the first book. Sometimes you have books that, the first one's a hit, and so the narrator decides that they're going to, write more books in a series, and you can feel that it wasn't really planned. This book isn't like that. This book, you could tell from the end of book one that there were plans for the next book, and that there were plans for books in the future after that. The way that he set up the growth for the main character, you knew that you were going to have a couple of books to go through. And so, once again, this is another good example of a sequel. And so let's get into it. Starting with Uniqueness. So, I gave the previous book a little bit of a higher score on the Uniqueness scale than this one. The randomness in the magic system kind of felt a little bit less random, and so the book relied more on the fantasy and lit RPG mechanics that you see in a lot of books these days. And so I only gave it a 4 out of 5 for Uniqueness. It was really cool to see them dive into like other worlds and other universes, and that was really cool, but that's not something that's uncommon to this type of genre. And so it only got a 4 out of 5. For character development, it also dropped just a hair. It felt like this was another one of those books where the second book focused a lot more on the secondary characters than the main character. The main character grew some. They had some really, serious moments that he had to deal with, some earth-shaking moments for him. But there weren't any big wow moments. There was nothing that he did that I was just like, oh my gosh, like that's amazing. Like at the very end of the book, there was some kind of cool things, but we're not really going to get to see that until the next one. We're not going to get to see how that works out until book 3. And so I only gave it a 4.5 out of 5. It was good still. Like it had steady growth and development. There were a couple of emotional moments in there, but there wasn't anything that really wowed me in his character development. And so 4.5 out of 5. Side characters, as I mentioned just a couple seconds ago, side characters felt like it was more the focus of this book. One of the characters that was brought in near to the end of the last book became a very important part of this book, and felt like she was a bigger focus to me. We got to see her grow and develop, and we got to see her start to open up emotionally. Whereas, in the previous books and to some extent the majority of this book, she was very antagonistic to some of the characters. And then one of the things that really brought home to me the secondary characters in this series, there was a character that that made a choice in this book that was very against what you would have wanted for her in the series. And seeing the author make choices for characters because it makes sense for that character instead of because it's what everyone wanted, is a good call for me. Obviously, I wasn't super stoked to hear that it happened, and you'll know what I'm talking about when you get to it, but the choice was made, and it made perfect sense for the character in that world. And so, 5 out of 5 for secondary characters. Excellent job there. It might have been a little bit too much time on secondary characters. I would knock you on that, except for the fact that the main character was there all the time. So it's not like you didn't get to see what was happening with the main character. It just wasn't impressive. And so really felt like the focus was on secondary character growth. The magic system, I feel like, got a boost this time around. So we have the same stuff from the previous magic system. A lot is known about it. There's a little bit of randomness. But we're starting to see that there could be a little bit of a pattern to what's going on here. The book doesn't get into a lot of detail. This is just from like outside perspective reading it. I'm just like, I don't know if all of this is as random as we think it is. I think there could be some kind of outside influence that's making this happen. But in addition to that, we have, we start talking about magic from outside of this world, and how this extra universal magic impacts the current world, and like that comes into like being a pretty big struggle, and that's important in this new world. And so there's like even more things that we don't know that are playing a part into this magical world that makes it a lot more interesting. And I find that pretty great. As with the narration, it's pretty fantastic. Dynamic voicing was just as good as the previous book. We got to see a little bit more dynamic voicing onto the main character. The main character had a lot of moments. I shouldn't say a lot. That's inaccurate. Had a couple of moments that were very emotional, earth-shaking moments. And when you heard the character talk during those points, you could feel that was happening. You could feel that they were like questioning things going on in their life. They're like, oh my gosh, like this changes everything. What do I do? What do I believe? How do I feel? And you could feel that in the tone that was provided by the narration. So once again, there's not much more you could ask than that. 5 out of 5 for dynamic voicing. And I boosted the point for vocal cast this time up to a 5 out of 5 as well. The reason I did that was, obviously this is a very subjective perspective. But the reason I did that was that the previous issue from the previous book, where the background characters were less distinctive, wasn't as noticeable in the series or in this book. It could be because there were less secondary characters. Maybe it focused more on, or less background characters. It focused a lot onto the secondary characters that you knew. But I felt like the narrator did a great job. And so everyone felt very distinctively voiced. I knew who they were by how they were voiced. And that was it. And so I gave a 5 out of 5 for vocal cast. So the extra information was very similar to the previous one. High school and above for violence, for topics of morality, even some sexuality, although it wasn't as present in this book. Humor, it was more humorous than serious, but there were some pretty serious moments in there, so a pretty decent balance. Romance, just a splash. There's a little bit of chaste romance in this, I feel like. Which is kind of fun to bring into play in a book 2. Action, of course there is. Gore, of course there is. But not a lot. It's not excessive, just enough that you know it's there. And once again, a very high engagement. I came out of this book looking for the next. It's not out yet. Was sad. And so, I didn't put the book down. I just kept reading it until it was done. And it felt like it was over way too fast. And so I would give it a very high on the engagement scale. Overall, once again, book was a 4.62, narrator was a 5 out of 5, and overall was a 4.75. So pretty great ratings, and that's it. That's into the review. He Who Fights with Monsters 2, just as good as He Who Fights with Monsters 1. If you pick the first one up, be prepared to pick the second one up, because you're not going to want to just read one of them. Like, subscribe, comment. I'm still waiting for people to give me suggestions on rating scales and things like that. Obviously, if you think it's great, you could just say that too. And thank you. Thank you for everyone who's watching this. The authors who come and look at the review. The potential readers who are trying to find books to listen to, or people who just like to see if I share the same opinion they did. I appreciate everyone who comes and watches the videos. It makes it feel like it's worth the time and effort to put them And if you don't listen to books and you're interested, I do have a link to Audible. It should give you a free trial if you don't already have one. What that comes with is a credit, which you can use to purchase any book for free, because they give you the credit for free, right? If you keep the membership, then you get a credit every month. You can upgrade it to 2 credits a month, and those credits get you any book you want to. And I think that's pretty great, because not every book is the same size. I look at books from how many hours they are, ranging from 10 to 50. It's all 1 credit. And so I find that to be pretty great. You can buy more credits. You can purchase books at a discount. They have sales all the time. There is a daily deal, which is literally a book for like $6 almost every day. And so I find Audible to be pretty great because they have a huge selection. And so, yeah, that's it. Feel free if you want to use that link. I think there's a link to Patreon in the description. That's just a place to donate to me if you want to. Don't feel like you have to. You don't really get anything extra for doing it. You just make me happy. And so that's it. Have a good day.